Hey everyone, welcome, and in this video we're going to learn how to build a universal resolver using the Airstack API. So what a universal resolver is essentially something that helps you to resolve from one Web3 identities to another. So what I mean by Web3 identities in this context could mean like 0x address or social such as lands and Farcaster, and also includes domain names such as ENS. So for a quick demo right here, for example, I want to resolve like vitalik.lens, and I want to get like the address, the Farcaster, and ENS domains hold within it. So here I can just click go, and in a few moments it's going to spit out to me like, hey, what the address, the primary ENS, all the other ENS names that are on primary, and also the Farcaster, and of course like lens are given directly, and it should be the same as what's given right here. So without further ado, let's start to build it out. First, let's start by cloning our starter project right here. I'm going to give you the link in the description below, so make sure to check it out. So once you go to this link right here, the Universal Resolver Starter, so here we can just scroll down and clone the project locally. So to clone the project locally, it's very easy. Just need to copy this command right here, and then just go to your terminal and paste it in your preferred directory so that you can clone that project locally just like that. So once it's done, you're gonna be placed directly inside the directory that just cloned. So in this case, we can check out the content of the directory first. And there you go, we have a bunch of files that essentially is just cloned directly copied from this repository right here. To get started with development, let's get back to our terminal right here and open your favorite code editor. In this case, I'm going to use VS Code. So just like that. And the VS Code is going to open right there. So let's open terminal and let's do 2 steps to set up our basic environment. So in this case, let's install the dependencies by running npm install. You can use yarn or pnpm, both work the same. And in a few moments, it's going to generate us our dependencies in the node modules folder, as you can see right there. And once it's successful, then you're done with the first step. The second step is also very simple. You just essentially need to set the environment variables. So in this case, as you see, we already have the .env.example file right here. We just need to copy and paste and rename it to env.local. So let's do that really quickly. And there you go. So in the environment variables here, we just need to fill in one information right here, which is the Airstack API key. So let's get that really quickly. Go to app.airstack.xyz. Keep in mind that you will need an account for this before you get your API key. So then go to the top right here, the profile icon, and then go to View API Keys, and there you go. You get your API key just as easy as that. Copy it and go back to your code editor, paste it, and save it. And there you go. Essentially, those are the basic setup. Now we can try to run our application right here. And let's open it really quickly. And in a few moments, you can see we have the basic setup that we already have in the beginning of the video. So we have the UI already, but the difference is that there's no functionality. So in this case, if we want to resolve vitalik.lens as we did in the beginning, nothing's going to happen. And why is that? So let's get into the folders a bit right here. So go to src, graphql, and resolve.js. As you can see right here, the universal resolver is still just an empty string. There's no GraphQL query to call the Airstack API, and that's why like nothing is happening, nothing is getting resolved at all. So let's go on to the next step and build our query using Airstack. So let's again get back to app.airstack.xyz, but this time let's go to the Explorer page right here on the second tab. And in here, as you can see, we have this interface right here, and let's use the AI assistant to help us construct our query. Using the AI assistant, it's a solution out of box by Airstack. Essentially, you can build your query very easily using natural language. So in this case, let's try to emulate what we did when we tried to resolve vitalik.lens. So in this case, we can use this query right here for vitalik.lens, show me 0x address, web3 socials, and ENS domain. And once you have that, let's generate the query. And in a few moments, the AI is going to think of a solution that fits the description, the prompt that you gave. And there you go. In a few moments, it's going to give you the solutions right there. And there, as you see, we get the address, the Farcaster, the lens, as we have from here, and then also a bunch of ENS domains that is held by vitalik.lens himself. Now, while we already have the base of our query right here, and it should be correct, we still need just one more thing, and that is the primary domain. So in this case, let's modify our query a little bit in here by scrolling down to primary domain, as you can see right there, and just select the same thing, which is name right there. And when we click on it, we'll also get the primary domain. There you go. So now that we have all the response that we needed, essentially, we need to think back that for universal resolver, it's not just about the output to getting like the 0x address, socials, and domain, but the input as well must accept all three of those kinds. Luckily with Airstack, essentially, we have something called identity API that is embedded within all our APIs. So that means like the input for this identity input right here can essentially be all those inputs that I just mentioned right there. It could be 0x address, socials, or even ENS domain. So for example, if I change this to ENS, it will essentially return me the same stuff. And there you go. Without any additional work, we're already done with our query for the universal resolver. So the one last thing that we need to do is make it production ready. And in this case, we need to add what's called variables to the query. So one reason why we want to do that is because when you're building an application and you have user inputs, users are going to have inputs that varies. It could be an address, it could be a social, it could be anything. So in that case, you need to make the input right here, the identity varies, and you can use variables to just achieve that. So in this case, let's swap it with a variable. Let's call it address right here. And let's have the address as an argument. Oops. So it's this case, it's going to be identity. I guess let me check really quickly. So that's the type. It shouldn't be an array. So it should be identity right here with exclamation mark. Exclamation mark just means that the input shouldn't be null. So in this case, once we have that, we can do the same query again, just like what we have to get the same response, but this time using the variable. So in this case, have it in JSON format, and the field as we have it, the variable name is address. So let's have it right there. And let's try again with vitalik.lens, and we should get the same response once more. So there you go. So let's copy our query right here and then paste it into our universal resolver. It's right there. Paste and save it. And now let's get back to our application now and try again. Of course, right now, there will still be nothing. We just added our variables right here, but the query is correct. We just need to hook it up using the Airstack SDK. So to do that, we already have our Airstack SDK installed as dependencies, as you can see, at airstack/airstack-react. And then we already also have initialized it if you use the starter code right here. But if you're using your own project, you need to provide the Airstack API key to initialize the SDK right here using the init function imported from the @airstack/airstack-react right there. So now let's get to our app.jsx right here, where we're going to call the query for the universal resolver that we just had in the beginning of the demo right there. So in this case, we're going to import the universal resolver that we have right here. So as you can see, VS Code already have auto completion, so I just need to press enter. And the second thing, I also need to call the use query, but this time it's going to use query from the Airstack SDK. So just like that, we have all the imports done. Now we only need to call the API. So as you can see right here, I have GitHub Copilot, so it already auto-completes it for me. The only thing that I need to add is going to be the variables. So in this case, I'm going to add the variable that is the address. And let's try once again vitalik.lens. So in this case, we have data, we have loading. This on button click is not correct. It's not part of the query response. So let's remove that. And then here, as you can see, we have data, we have loading. So data will be where it provides us with the data that we get from the API, and loading is just to indicate whether the API is still calling or not. So before using these variables in the UI, let's first try to console.log the data to see how the data structure looks like. And let's save it and get back to our application right here and go to the console. So there you go. This is our response right there. So as you can see, we'll get the response exactly the same as we get from the Explorer as we tested before. So we get the addresses, see right there, and we have the domains, we have the primary domains, and also we'll get the social, which will consist of the Farcaster and also the lens right there. So we already have all the information right there. We now just need to provide it to the UI right here, to the UI component, which is the universal resolver. Now you don't need to make any modifications for the universal resolver in this context. I minimized the changes needed in here. So, but we can explore a bit like what props do we have. So we have three, that is data, loading, and on button click. So data is going to be the data that we have loaded from here, and loading is to indicate whether like the API call is still loading before the data is provided. And then the on button click right here is going to provide us like a callback when the button is clicked. So let's follow up with that a bit later, but let's focus on these two. So let's provide the data directly right here, the data props, and then the loading props in here as well. So let's save it. Now let's try to refresh the page again right here from the application. And as you can see, there's a loading component that we just had because we now have added the loading props. And also we have all the UI with all the information from the wallet that I've just shown you just now, with the address, domains, primary domain, and socials all laid out very nicely in this table right here. Now it looks like we're almost done right there, but not quite, because as you can see right here, the component, the universal resolver component, is only rendered when it first loads. But however, if I try again right here, vitalik.lens, and press go, there's nothing happening because like the component itself, the value, it has not been toggled to the button click and to be dependent upon the input that we have right there. So to fix on that, we need to make a little bit of changes right here. So let's get back to our code right here. So instead of using use lazy query in here, we use something called use lazy query. So the difference between use query and use lazy query, it functions the same. The difference is just use query call the queries directly when it first loads, but for use lazy query, it only calls whenever we want it to. It's being lazy, and hence why it's called lazy query. So in this case, let's also make changes to the import as well right there. And for the output, it's going to look a bit different. Instead of looking like this, the data and loading JSON right here is going to be inside an array, and it's going to be the second output, the second element of the array. The first one is going to be the callback function that we can use to call the API on demand. So in this case, I'm going to name it resolve identities. And remember that inside our universal resolver, we have something called on button click, and that's where we're gonna have the value of the resolve identities be put, because like as you can see right here If we scroll down a bit, this is the go button right here, but what we need to search is the on submit in the form element right here. It's going to call the on button click whenever we submit, whenever we click the button. So in this case, and then it's also going to provide the address, the variable that we have from the state that is toggled from the input box that we have right here. So whenever like user changes the value right here and then click the button, it's going to provide the value into this identity state right here, and it's going to provide the on button click to resolve the identities on behalf of us. So everything is going to be dependent on the identity state right here instead of like hard coding it as we have right here with Vitalik.lens. So we can just remove this for now. And then on button click, make it into resolve identities. And we can also remove this console log data, save it. And there you go. In a moment, now it looks like everything disappeared, but no worries about it. It's just actually because like now instead of like rendering it whenever it first load, it's going to render based on the button click and the input that we provide right here. So in this case, let's provide again Vitalik.lens as a test. Click go, and the loading component is going to load because the API is loading, and there you go. We get the same result as previously, but this time the component is going to be rendered once the button is clicked. So it's definitely toggled right there, and we can try it again. So for example, another test right here with stunny.lens, and in a few moments it's going to provide us with the result, and this time it's a different one. So it's going to be the one tied to stunny.lens, the address, as you can see right there, and also we know now that Stunny has 3 lens profile right there, but no Farcaster and ENS domain. So hope you guys learned a lot from this video. If you guys have any suggestions or any questions, feel free to provide those in the comments below, and I'm going to see you in the next video.